way, Jose.
Red Hot Gotti, come subscribe, come subscribe, come subscribe, come subscribe.
No way.
Red Hot Gotti. Alright, so today I am doing a third part to my other videos about, just ranking Spider-Man, the first game, versus Spider-Man Miles Morales. We're going to be going over which game is better overall. Now, we're actually doing the villains thing, so obviously it was the better suits, the better characters, the better villains, the better story, and the better supporting characters. That's all 5 categories, and let's just get into it. Now, when it comes to the villains, there's a lot of villains in both games. If you were to add them all together, and just individually, when it comes to the first game in 2018, but we're just gonna be going through some of them and kind of describing what type of games or what type of villains each game makes. Now, I would say for the first game, the main villain was Dr. Octopus. You could say it was Mr. Negative as well, and you could say it was kind of like Harry's dad, like Harry Osborn, or not Harry, Norman Osborn. But like in general, I would say it was Dr. Octopus just because he had the most development, he had the most screen time, stuff like that. I would say for the Tinkerer, she's the villain of Miles Morales. Obviously it's Finn, it's Miles' best friend, so it kind of makes sense that she's the main villain. I'm going to be doing some comparisons for them. Now I'm going to be doing some for some of the other villains. Now, I want to rank them in different categories, kind of just see how they compare to each other. I guess in terms of strength, I could do that as like a first thing. If these two were to fight, I would say Dr. Octopus would win because he's just more skilled overall. He's more intelligent. He made the arms to begin with. He made it with Peter, I guess I could say, but at the same time, he was the one mainly working on the tech. And even though Peter knows how to make it individually, Ock kind of expanded upon it, I'm pretty sure, and that's why it's so powerful. Like, actually, when he had all 4 arms, he was able to combat Spider-Man, and Spider-Man has superpowers. He actually has super strength, durability, speed. So like the fact that he was able to withstand Spider-Man's attacks and be able to like go against him and actually do damage to him is pretty impressive, I'd say. And actually his arms were able to stab through Peter, so those are really strong arms. You got to be honest, for a superpower being, like, just to be able to stab through him, it's pretty impressive. Now the Tinkerer has like a sword usually, and she actually is pretty agile, I'd say, and can jump really high, just like the other I guess you can say, what are they called again? Basically, Tinkerer's henchmen. They had like the powers from the suits, and they have like shields and like these like huge staffs that like they smash into the ground and stuff like that. But like, yeah, she usually just has like a sword or something like that. So yeah, power-wise, she's pretty good, and she's able to handle Miles and be able to fight against him pretty well. So she can fight superpower beings with that tech as well. But overall, yeah, I guess Dr. Octopus would take that. In terms of character, I would say Dr. Octopus as well, just because I like his development more. I think overall, he just was progressed in the game in terms of his relationship with Peter and just, all the conversations they had and stuff like that. You really felt like these two knew each other for a long time. It meant something because throughout the whole game you saw that. I feel like Tinkerer, it was kind of missed somewhat. Like, you did see her throughout the game, but it didn't have the same impact. Like Miles was in the first game, the first Spider-Man game with Peter being the main character, and we didn't really hear anything about Finn, even though she's supposedly like his best friend or something like that. Like, I don't know, I just feel like it would have had more impact if we knew that Finn like existed in the world, I guess. You didn't need like a bunch of information about her. Obviously this is Peter's story in the first game, but I don't know, I just feel less connected to that character, especially when Tinker is a completely different concept in this game, even from like the comics. I would feel like with Dr. Octopus, he actually is who he should be. Obviously he's Peter's not best friend, his mentor, which he wasn't in like other iterations except like Spider-Man 2 sort of ish. And yeah, like, so you can change things about the character, but I feel like Dr. Octopus is just better adapted, and he has a more connection to the hero, which is more interesting in terms of like character dynamics. Obviously he's more powerful, but that doesn't really mean much in terms of character because it's like, yeah, whatever. But I just wanted to mention like who won at the beginning, just for kicks and giggles. So my point with doing all this is basically to describe which villains overall are actually better for which game. So I would say overall in Miles Morales, they're really good in terms of like characterizing the main villains to be, you know, strong and just very capable overall, have a connection to the hero, but they kind of lack just like slightly compared to the first game. You know, with Dr. Octopus actually being, you know, a more recurring character, a more influential character in terms of like Peter's development, all that other stuff. I would say the same problems with Simon Krieger, I think his name is, in the Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now, I feel like Simon Krieger was kind of undercooked. I feel like as a not mastermind, as kind of like a boss man, a kind of like a villain in a suit. He wasn't very imposing. Obviously he was like taller than Miles, I guess, but he didn't really have any like super enhancements, like superpowers like the Tinkerer or something like that. I don't know. So he's just kind of a boring villain overall, and he's kind of irritating. Now he serves his purpose in the story of obviously being like the guy in a suit, you know, doing the business stuff, and he's the reason that Tinkerer even has a story. But in general, he feels like a plot device to just be there so that Tinkerer has something to do, and to be mad at Miles. But with Doc Ock, it's just like I feel like he could be so much more than that, and it's not just about Otto. Like obviously, not Otto. It's not just about Norman Osborn. So I feel like it could go outside of that, and like the whole idea of him spreading devil's breath throughout the whole city, it's just like it could have been expanded in like different ways, like with the arms taking over his mind and stuff like that, like in Spider-Man 2. It's just like you could have done more than that. That would have been outside of just like that businessman kind of aspect. But even with this businessman aspect, I feel like Norman is more interesting because he's connected to Harry's best friend, Harry's best friend Peter. What I meant to say was he's connected to Peter. Yeah, he's basically connected to Spider-Man's best friend is what I meant to say. So yeah, I was sort of right. He's connected to both, and it has more of a recurring issue kind of thing, or at least for the character, not in the actual story. Because now we're actually going to see Harry in the second game, and apparently he's going to have Venom potentially. You know, I don't know how I feel about that, but in general, it actually has some story relevance. He actually was mentioned in the game multiple times, so it's not like a thing where I was complaining about Tinkerer not being mentioned in the first Spider-Man game in 2018. It's not like that. He actually, like, Harry was actually mentioned, so that's good. So yeah, I feel like overall Norman is just more entertaining on screen. He has more of a presence than Simon. So yeah, I would say this point also goes to the first game, you know, Peter's story. When it comes to Prowler versus Mr. Negative, in terms of like that sort of aspect, I would say they're less comparable in terms of like similarities, but I would say they're both connected to the main hero, obviously. Prowler is more of like Miles' uncle. I almost said aunt, Jesus. And Mr. Negative is just like, I guess like one of his, like, how do I even put it? He's like sort of a pseudo mentor. God, I can't speak. But not really. I would say Otto's more of like that kind of, he fits more of that role. But Mr. Negative is just kind of like a friend that kind of went bad, and that's mainly it. And obviously you see his backstory and everything like that, and it's really tragic, and you see his parents die, and I think he's mad at Norman as well. So it's like it has that sort of connection, like Norman's a really bad dude and everyone is saying it, so maybe Peter should listen to that. I don't know. I feel like his story, it would have been more interesting if it was fleshed out more, like throughout the whole game and not just at the end. I feel like you know, because we got the backstory for him in the MJ mission, which I'm not gonna lie, freak the MJ missions, but that's beyond the point. That's not even gonna talk about that in this video. The point is, we got it a little too late. I feel like we should have got more of him throughout the story instead of him just fighting and we're just getting nothing from him in terms of development, plot stuff. You know, I just wanted to get to know the character more, just like Norman, just like Otto Octavius, stuff like that. And Prowler, it's like you didn't get that much for him either, but I feel like it was more, I guess, beneficial to the plot and to Miles overall, because there's a new character. He's interesting. We don't know that much about him. Obviously, if you've seen like Spider-Verse and stuff like that, you already know the character, or if you've seen the comics. But it's interesting to see this portrayal. It's a little bit different, and it adds a new character for Miles to interact with, and also it's a nice twist that he actually is like sort of a villain slash anti-hero kind of thing. More so a villain, I'd say. But he turns around, he changes his ways somewhat. So I think that's more interesting overall as a character arc. So I'll actually give this to Miles Morales. Now, the one thing I do want to mention is when I think about just like the characters that were in the first game versus the second game, I think about Vulture. And Vulture is significantly downplayed in the second game, like, to be honest, in Miles Morales, because he's just like a simulation. And that's kind of, I don't know, it kind of speaks volumes to me. Like, when I think about Rhino, for example, who's also in the game, and I actually wanted to talk about that too, so I'll just segue into that. Rhino is in Miles Morales, and he actually has a bigger role where he's actually fighting both Spider-Men, and this is in the beginning of the game, obviously. And that's he sort of, I don't want to say plot device, but he helps develop Miles into like an actual like independent hero, and I feel like that's more interesting than like anything that Vulture was in Miles Morales. So yeah, like stuff like that is a problem, but I guess he didn't need to be in the game. So it's just like some people might have had a problem with stuff like that, and it does kind of give off the feeling of like, yeah, this is just a secondary game to like the first game kind of thing. It's not like it's its own thing, but it's like, what I mean, it's not as impactful or huge, like large scale, as like the first game. It's its own little thing. It's almost like the game is telling you, this is a smaller scale story, which is fine. It's just like I still like the game overall. I think objectively, I don't know, I might make a video objectively going over which one's better in terms of plot and all this other stuff, but I feel like when it comes to these like rankings, when it comes to like the suits, obviously that's more subjective, but thinking about like which game has like more detailed in suits that are actually from like some sort of iteration of Spider-Man, like from the comics or a game or whatever, that's why I give it to Peter for that one. And then when I think about the second video, when it comes to character, I'm just going over objective things that are actually in the story happening, in the character arcs and stuff like that. And I guess when it comes to the villains, it's just more about how they affect the story. So again, I guess the last 2 points would be like, again, Vulture is kind of like inconsistent or not non-existent. I can't speak in this, but in the second game, but it's fine because he's doing his own story. He needs sort of his own villains, and that's why Prowler's a very interesting character. In Rhino, again, I actually liked him more in Miles Morales, gotta be honest. So I guess I'll get that to Miles Morales. So yeah, I would say it's 1, 2, 3. Technically, I'll say actually Miles and Peter are kind of tie for this one, but I'm just gonna give it to Peter just because I feel like Dr. Octopus, Norman, and Vulture overall are better in the first game. So yeah, actually it'd be like 3 out of 5 at that point. Yeah, so I guess the first game wins in 2018. The first game is better in terms of villains, but Miles Morales is definitely really good. So definitely play both games. Comment, subscribe, like, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.
No way, Jose.
Red Hot Gotsy, come subscribe, like, come subscribe, like, come subscribe, like, come